I'm Ken Klippenstein with TYT Investigates. I'm here to talk to you about the conflict between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi. This had been simmering for a little while now, but it's really heated up this weekend when Pelosi made a number of, I think, inflammatory remarks towards AOC. And what's changed now isn't that Pelosi's, making these kind of statements, these kind of disparaging remarks, but that AOC responded very firmly and directly. So let me run by you guys what exactly happened, what was said, and then I'll, provide you some evidence so you can make your own conclusion about the nature of this conflict. So Pelosi was interviewed by the New York Times' Maureen Dowd. The article described the anger of the quote unquote squad, the kind of new insurgent progressive wing that came into office this past midterm, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley. And what Pelosi said, which I thought was really disparaging, was that um, she said, I'm quoting now, all these people have their public whatever in their Twitter world, but they didn't have any following. They're four people, and that's how many votes they got. I don't know what she means by that because these four people had to get tons of votes to, win these seats. These are all freshman representatives that had to compete with a bunch of other people to get where they're at. But I think what she means is that they have four votes in the House, but that's not necessarily a representation of their popularity, I don't think. I mean, to take AOC, for example, it's amazing to me that she would just write her off like that after she defeated a 10-term congressman, Joe Crowley, by 15%. That AOC just stomped this guy, and he was, interestingly enough, Pelosi's main competition for head of the Democratic Party. So this was an extraordinarily powerful person that AOC not just defeated, she washed him. And AOC was 28 at the time. Crowley had been in Congress for 10 terms, had every imaginable, conceivable connection to, New York machine Democratic politics. So, you can disagree with AOC, but I don't think any reasonable person can say that her showing wasn't extremely impressive. And I want to emphasize that the stuff Pelosi said is nothing new on her part. She has been making these passive aggressive sort of disparaging remarks for some time now. So I'll give you some examples now. In March, Pelosi said, quote, while there are people who have large numbers of Twitter followers, what's important is that we have large numbers of votes on the floor of the House. And that is so enraging because she doesn't understand that those two are connected. I mean, I'm the most skeptical of, thinking social media is politics. I think it's important to actually do the groundwork and go door to door, talk to people, organize. I absolutely agree with that, but that doesn't seem to be what she's saying. She seems to be implying that just because you're huge on Twitter doesn't mean that you have a following, and that's just not true. Yes, Twitter is not real life, and social media is not the same as real life, but that means something that all these young people that retweet her and engage with her and think about what she's saying, are engaging with this figure in ways they hadn't before. So let me just give you one poll that I feel like just blows up Pelosi's argument about AOC and this crowd not being impressive. AOC is literally the most famous congressperson right now, and that was what a poll conducted by Gallup, a very respected polling organization, found in March, and I'll link to that in the description later. But that's just a fact. You can't argue. I mean, I'm sorry that Pelosi's not impressed that they, only have a few seats, but all of this squad, the quote unquote squad, are extremely popular. These are some of the most popular figures in the party: Tlaib, Omar, AOC, and that's not just on social media. You can see in terms of people recognizing their names and knowing who they are. It's phenomenal that AOC is the most famous representative, and she's 29, and this is her first term. How many people have been in Congress forever and no one knows who they are as much as they know AOC? I mean, I think that's incredible. And to give Pelosi her due, she's right. AOC and this crowd in general have high unfavorables. They're famous, but they draw very strong opinions. But a lot of these unfavorables come from Republicans, and it's almost like the inverse of Trump, where he has extremely high unfavorables among Democrats. And look how that turned out for Trump. I feel like it wasn't the worst thing. These are, there are broadly two philosophies. One is that you just try to appeal to everyone, try to scoop up these moderates. But the truth is, half the country doesn't vote. So if you can just turn out a, motivated, enthusiastic base, even if it's a, segment of the country instead of just everyone, that can work quite well. So I don't see why she's writing this particular group off. And what Pelosi was saying, making the remarks in the context of the border bill that had passed, saying that she was upset that they didn't support this bill. The bill would give money to Customs and Border Protection to continue putting up their facilities. Now, Pelosi's argument and the party leadership's argument was that they need this money to improve the conditions of the facility. But come on, they already are, have these so-called ice boxes where they're chilling the rooms. That costs money, and that's hurting people. It clearly isn't just money. I don't think. I mean, how do we know that the border authorities aren't just going to use this money to build more of these things, and not necessarily better ones, but just more to throw people in? I mean, that seems like common sense to me. Um, so I just want to close out with some of the tweets that AOC posted with respect to Pelosi's remarks that I feel like handled it, directly and firmly, but in a sort of dignified way. So here's one of the tweets. AOC in response, she's quote tweeting someone who said AOC shouldn't insult Speaker Pelosi. She should learn from her. AOC quote tweets that and responds with several Pelosi quotes. Here we go. A glass of water could have been that Pelosi actually said, which is amazing because Joe Crowley was a 20-year incumbent, 10-term congressman, tons of money, could have been the leader of the House majority. Just crazy that he would say that. And then another thing she said was the Green Dream or whatever, and this was meant to disparage the Green New Deal, which you can have views on it, but what is your solution to the climate catastrophe, which is a catastrophe and threatens human life literally? I think it's amazing that first of all you would disparage it like that. Yes, it's unlikely to pass, and it's President Foreman with the present constitution of the party. But I mean, at least she's proposing things that deal with the core of the problem. I don't see anything from leadership that comes close to dealing with what we're up against. And then finally, the quote I mentioned before, they're public whatever. What's wild about these statements is they're not even disagreeing on policy on from Pelosi's point of view. These statements are just they sound very passive aggressive and kind of like they're just trying to put someone down. Like I don't really see there's no rationale, it's just kind of like talk to the hand sort of thing. And I don't see how that's productive. And it's wild to me that someone would get mad about AOC insulting Pelosi when Pelosi's been doing this for how long, and AOC finally responds, and then people are complaining. Here's another tweet from AOC. That public quote whatever is called public sentiment, and wielding the power to shift it is how we actually achieve meaningful change in this country. I absolutely agree. The fact that Pelosi would say their public whatever, it seems to suggest a disdain for public sentiment, which it ideally in a democracy these representatives are supposed to represent. They're supposed to represent the public opinion. So it just I don't understand it. And here's another tweet from AOC. I find it strange when members act as though social media isn't important. They set millions of dollars on fire to run TV ads so people can see their message. That's totally true. And how many people even watch TV anymore? That's a boomer, outlet largely. If you look at the CNN, Fox, these are people in their 60s or like the average viewer. AOC is absolutely right. Now, I'm sympathetic to their argument that people need to be more engaged on the ground, doing door-to-door, phone banking, talking to people about issues, attending, local government stuff, not spending as much time just posting on Twitter. But you can't say Twitter is worse than all the other stuff the DNC just blows money on that I can't imagine works very well. I mean, we've seen the ads. It's just, and that's reaching a specific segment of the country, older people. Social media at least engages younger people. And she closes saying, I haven't dialed for dollars once this year and have more time to do my actual job, yet we'd rather campaign like it's 2008. Yeah, social media lets you, access people in a way that you don't have to raise money. So I think she's right about that. Let me close out with something from Jeff Stein, an excellent reporter from Washington Post, who I encourage you all follow. He sticks to evidence really great and doesn't, float into opinion. Really respect him for that reason, but he's fair to progressives, which I respect. He said, worth noting that each member of the squad, that's the freshman Democratic class that Pelosi was kind of ragging on in the interview with New York Times. He says, worth noting each member of the squad is now the lead author of pivotal policy proposals. And so he lists several of them. AOC, the Green New Deal, the biggest federal anti-poverty subsidy. Omar, 1.6 trillion in student debt forgiveness. Presley, back pay for contractors and shutdown. These are all extremely important policies, which even if they don't pass, this can become the sort of skeleton of something that can we can revisit later as the Constitution and makeup and public opinion changes. We're going to have stuff we can revisit that had already been put out there. And not just that, this gets people talking and thinking about these things. S- Legislation doesn't happen overnight, especially good legislation. A lot of bad legislation gets hammered together quickly, but this is a process of educating the public and familiarizing them with what can be done. So, there's a lot of hand wringing about the party's going to be split. Civil war within the Democrats. They said all the same stuff about Donald Trump when the Republicans were hashing it out with him, and look at how it turned out for them. It it worked out pretty well. They controlled every branch of government after the election. Conflict is not necessarily bad. You don't just want it. That's the whole point of politics. Politics is hashing out differences over things. I wish Pelosi would, articulate those differences in a more mature way that's not just, denigrating people. But in any event, this is a conflict that needs to happen, and the rank and file voters need to decide: do we want the sort of old money approach where they don't really engage with the public that much and they go to a lot of fundraisers, or do they, and appeal to moderate voters as opposed to trying to mobilize, younger people or people who are not usually engaged in politics, or do we want this insurgent wings approach, which is absolutely, make a case to the general public? This is a debate we need to have, and it's good that we're having it. And I would say, don't wring your hands over this, because this is how things improve. Once again, this is Ken Klippenstein with TYT Investigates. Thanks so much for joining me, guys.